And moving on next, let me introduce our speakers for our panel discussion today. So I'll be hosting the panel discussion as well. We have 3 speakers today. All of them are our JCU alumni and JCUSAA members. So firstly, we have Devika Kumar. She's currently a postgraduate student at LaSalle College of the Arts. Then we have Jason Paul. He's currently self-employed. And we have Rajaneesh Kurup. We just call him Raj. He's currently the head of healthcare strategy at Equinix Asia Pacific. So if I can invite our speakers to open their webcam, show their beautiful faces. Hello, Jason.
Hey.
Hello, Devika. Hello, Raj. Okay, welcome to the panel discussion. And also this is an open floor panel discussion. So meanwhile, just keep the questions coming in the Q&A or in the chat, and then we'll address the question one by one. Meanwhile, I've already introduced you guys briefly, but perhaps if you guys have something to add on whatsoever, can we start with Devika? Do you have some words to say to introduce yourself more in depth? Or what you've learned today, what you'd like to share today?
I think I'll just come from a student's perspective because graduating from JCU and then going on for postgrad it requires a lot of planning also, especially in terms of finances. So just giving like a student perspective of how basic things can help you plan your life better, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Jason, would you like to share a few words with us?
Yep. Hi guys. Hope everyone's having a good Sunday. So I graduated about 2 years ago, and I worked 1 year in the healthcare industry, and currently I am running an online business, doing affiliate marketing and selling some music instruments on the side. So hopefully you can shed some insight on the roads less traveled.
Okay, thank you so much. How about Raj? Do you have anything you want to share or introduce about yourself?
Sure. So for a lot of people who are just graduating, I went through that journey probably 15 years back or 14 years back from JC. So I graduated in 2006, and I've been here in Singapore for 15 years now. And what I would potentially hope to share today would be something that I wish somebody would have told me that probably 14 years back. We have all gone through some kind of a journey over the past many years, and I might have some things that could help you in your journey as you start working, as you start planning for your future.
Yeah, certainly. I think I graduated 3 years ago. I was December batch as well. And I wish someone had told me before I scrambled about looking for jobs, how to manage my finances, what do I do till date. So yeah, I hope this will be helpful to all our attendees as well. Let's start with the first question, right? So the first question we have is, what big expenses are you expecting and how do you plan for them? So the point of the panel discussion is to get everyone's perspective. Everyone came from different walks of life, different backgrounds, but we are all JC alumni, and we are getting more of a lay person's perspective on how to handle these things rather than from an expert. Sometimes we get like information overload, right? Like, oh my God, there's so much I need to do. What do I do, right? So, okay, let me repeat the question again. What big expenses are you expecting and how do you plan for them? Let's start like one by one so that everyone has a chance to answer. Can I start with Devika first?
Okay, I think so after graduation, I mean, like you're trying to figure out your jobs also and trying to understand how is it. So saving up from that perspective at least helps give us an idea about what kind of planning is needed further. Like from a personal perspective, I guess when I got into the job, my next goal was for my master's program. So I try to prioritize my finances accordingly to save up for it also. So yes.
Can you maybe explore more in depth on that? How did you save up for your master's program? I think perhaps we have fellow students who might be moving forward to their postgrad as well. How do you do that?
Okay, suppose like if you start off with I'm just giving a roundabout figure about like maybe a starting salary is 3K. So I guess I've always learned from my family or my brother that prioritizing the salary, I guess, like, I mean, there's a part of it which goes to CPF, but then there's also how you can divide it according to saving as well as spending, meaning whichever one you want to go for general stuff that you want to buy or go out for dinner or however. So I guess I would always proportionately divide it according to that. That's why, and then make it a point to monthly try to save it up and like not go beyond that budget. I guess so.
Okay, so basically budgeting to summarize the whole
Yeah.
thing, as well as making sure that during your salary you budget a certain amount for savings
Right.
for the future. Okay, Ken, how about you, Jason?
For myself, it's actually saving up for a house.
Ooh,
Yeah, so I have intentions to get a HDB BTO, and actually we applied recently. So yeah, saving up for
oh,
that.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So broadly speaking, I think a common theme is planning your finances, and starting early definitely helps. So you have to prioritize what is really a need versus what you want. Yeah.
Okay, Ken. Is there anything specific to your savings that you're looking at for buying a home or whatsoever? What steps have you gone through throughout your journey that you would like to share or planning?
Yep. I think the main thing for saving in general is, everyone has 24 hours in a day, is how you make use of it. And especially in your 20s, you still have the energy to keep going. You can maybe sleep lesser and, work more, but it's how you spend your time and use it effectively. After work, how you improve yourself, that's how you protect as well for the future.
Thank you so much for sharing. Also, just a reminder, back then during the Gina's Mentimeter, someone was sleep deprived. I know you can sleep less, but please don't be sleep deprived.
And that was my
Okay.
entry actually.
Oh no, you are the sleep deprived one. Okay. Raj, how about you? What would you like to share?
So, Steffi, just to clarify, are you talking about what are the big expenses that you would expect after you graduate, or now moving forward, what am I looking at as a big expense?
In your life stage right now,
Right
what
now.
are you expecting and how do you plan?
I think majority of my expenses, if I may call it that way, is moving towards investments. So it's more, it could be property, it could be anything else, right? In any of the asset classes that we have heard from the others earlier. So my focus is more towards that, I would say. And at this point, right now, of course, there are, as much as I would like to have a budget and stick to the budget and, stick to strict budgeting, it really doesn't work for me that well. So I mean, I hope that everybody tried to do that, but for me, it doesn't really work. Somehow unexpected expenses always creeps in, and that disrupts the plan. So I try to typically go with the flow, but majority I would focus on in terms of investing for the future.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing. So just to highlight Joshua Chu's comment, actually, we've heard from his lesson, follow the 50-30-20 budgeting rule. I think he'd be rolling his eyes at you for not following the budget. But how about Devika or Jason? Do you guys set up a budget in percentage? Do you guys follow it? Can I have Jason first?
Yep. Actually, for myself, I didn't really set a budget in the past. But what I did was I monitored my spending, and how I did this is I downloaded an app where I can just key in the amount and it collates for me. So I got into the habit of keying in every single expense right after. Yeah. So from there, every year I will just adjust accordingly, and that's how I review.
Oh, that's interesting. What app do you use?
Currently, I'm using Wally, Wally.
Wally. In case our audience wants to try that, you can look in your app store. All right, how about Devika?
Like, I guess for me, it would be budgeting, because I would prioritize my spending according to like putting out things that I want to buy, something that I want, or like my food items accordingly. And then a portion of it would be going to my savings for my like at least based on the trend like that, to save up for my master's at that stage. So I try to divide it according to my priorities that matter.
So you would say you have a certain rule, but you don't necessarily follow
There's
the
no
50-30-20.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
I guess like I would just try to accordingly plan out my spending, see how much I have spent it in the month, and then accordingly take it from there.
So it's more adaptive, so to speak.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, we have a question in the Q&A, so I'm going to pick up the question. It's directed to Raj. You seem like a person who likes to travel. How do you balance your wants, experiences, traveling, etc., with the high cost of living and the need to save up for the future?
That's a tough question. I do travel a lot. I mean, this year is definitely an exception, right? But even before the lockdown happened, at least 3 major travel happened for me. So yes, there is typically what happens is that unexpected expenses may creep in when you're traveling. But again, it goes back to how do we manage the rest, right? So there is a priority for me as far as I'm concerned. There is a priority that I'm focusing on in terms of investments. I also look at passive income as well quite a bit. So that can help, keep some of these unexpected expenses without impacting your baseline. So that's the reason I go back to, some of the other speakers, what they said. I think trying to build something as like a passive income through investments and many other methods that you can look at. You might have a side gig, you might have your own other businesses, which I would treat as my additional income, which I could use for anything that I'm planning, which or unplanned in certain cases, or I would reinvest that for generating more out of that. So that is typically how I would manage. If you are just sticking to your base income and you're going to work on that, and you're expecting to manage all these unexpected surprises, it's going to be quite hard. So that's where I think strict budgeting would be very important in those kind of situations.
So strict budgeting, basically. Okay, another comment from Joshua Chu. I think our financial advisor here is very active. Save up emergency funds to expect the unexpected last-minute events. So I think that's for you, Raj. So emergency funds equals to living expenses. Rule of thumb is 6 months of living expenses. Thank you so much for the tip, Joshua. All right.
I would say emergency funds, you shouldn't be using it as play money. So that should be kept on the side. So that is where,
that is true.
Yeah. So anything else that you are looking at from an additional spend, you should be looking at other ways. That's the reason I said you should have a side gig, or if you have the energy, if you have the passion to do some of those things, I think you should think of doing that, because I think when you have the energy, you should do it, because it's going to get harder and harder with a lot of commitments as you go further in your career, or when you have your family and so on. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Maybe as Jason said, as we get older, we need to sleep more. Okay, Jason and Devika, do you guys have anything you want to add on to the question?
All good for me.
Good for me also.
Okay, can. All right. Then I'll file that as answered. Okay, let's move on to the next question. The next question is more mental health related. I mean, some of us came from a psychology degree background, or perhaps work in the industry. We had a talk about mental health earlier. Does your finances affect your mental health? How do you overcome the feeling guilty about spending money or unable to control expenses? I think perhaps some of us may encounter these kind of things. All right, let me put the question in the chat. This is quite long. And let's start with Jason first. Jason,
Sure.
would you like to address the question?
Yeah, actually about this place, don't overspend. But, if you do, let's say you do overspend, I think the first thing is to learn from this experience. But some other things that you can consider is maybe find a way to sell off the things that you have bought, if it's material items, at least recoup some of the losses, because it can be quite stressful if you have spent and you feel guilty about it. But yeah, for example, let's say you bought a bag out of to reward yourself, or out of just you felt like it. So you can sell it on Carousel, for example, and it's very easy. So just a way to recoup the losses.
Buy it and sell it off again. Hi, Devika, I know you're in psychology as well, and your postgrad also is in psychology. Hey, would you like to answer the question as well?
Like how finances may affect your mental health? I mean, that is definitely there, because you'll be stressed out about how I have to save up for this, or I have to go and spend this much. I can only do this much, so I cannot overspend, or I have to take into consideration what has to go forward and everything. That's going to be there. But then I guess prioritizing what you want to do it with, what you want to do with the money, or what you want to achieve, I guess that would help. That would always help, and you bring you back to the surface, I guess. So like seeing, okay, this is, maybe I have $100 budget, suppose, that I can use as a money to spend during the month, that okay, I'm going to buy whatever I want to do it. But I actually like prioritizing, okay, this is only, I'm going to spend this much. It requires a lot of willpower, but at least that brings you back to your present, I guess. So for me is prioritizing and understanding what is necessary for that month, I guess. So yeah.
Do you ever have any stress or guilt over spending money, and how would you overcome that?
I guess like, okay, my parents describe me as thrifty, because I don't spend that, I don't let go of my money easily that much, and I would always see how to do it, so I don't end up feeling guilty. So that's why I try to put in across, like, okay, I will only spend this much. I will not try to go beyond this much. So I know it may not work in the long term, but then I guess it requires a lot of willpower to stop yourself from doing it.
I think the lesson here is willpower and discipline, I think. Yes. How about Raj? I mean, especially I think you have more commitment and more responsibility at your life stage. Does it affect your mental health, and how do you overcome or handle these things?
I would say, yes, it creates a lot of stress, especially in the early part of your career when you're earning lesser, you're starting. Then you might have a lot more commitments. You might have your student loans. You might have, some of us at least, will have to take care of the family. I mean, a lot of unexpected, or sometimes it's expected, and you need to plan for it, right? With the limited income that you might have. There could be a lot of stress around that. But again, that is where I think at the initial stages, if you are managing in terms of the buckets that you want to allocate certain amount, you can only manage to a certain extent with what you have, right? So that is where I think we need to manage in a balance between your means versus where you're going to spend, how you're going to spend, and so on. Secondly, what is important is to avoid unexpected expenses, for example, health related. So that's where I think when you talked about insurance, you're talking about protecting your ability to earn as well as protecting your wealth. I think it's going to be quite important, even if it's in the very, very early stages. So I'm a person who actually got insurance for my daughter in probably when she was 6 months old, right? And a lot of people were like really surprised. Oh, why do you want to do that? And I think even the insurance agency, to an extent, they were also kind of a bit surprised because of the amount or whatever, right? But my point is that is basically the foundation, in my opinion, right? And I have seen from where my family was and what my parents have gone through, for example, health related and so on. I think you seeing others and how what others are going through. And if you're not learning from that, I think then there is something wrong, right? So to me, I think that is one reason why you should try to avoid as much as you can. Plan for as much as you can to avoid unnecessary or unexpected situations that you might run into. So insurance is a great point, right? Start saving, of course, as early as you can. I started probably a bit late because I was trying to clear off a lot of commitments and things like that. But as much as possible, even if it's a little bit, I think start saving early. So then once you have a buffer created, once you have these kind of emergency funds or whatever, as you heard earlier, that will actually help you in terms of managing. So you're not really living paycheck to paycheck. So try to avoid that as early as possible, because then when you're adding more debts over debts over debt, it's going to just have a rolling effect. Just like when you said, compound interest, your debts can also be compounded month over month, year over year. So you need to manage that as early as possible, and then try to build on top of that.
Yeah, I think very good lessons over there. I want to elaborate more on the insurance part. I know you, of course, have additional insurance, but let's say I think a lot of the fresh graduates, they might be, they haven't insured themselves yet, or perhaps the young adults that they have already worked, they have work insurance that is already covering them. Do you think what kind of solutions or what should they do? Should they seek additional insurance? What do you think?
I think we should, because your employer's insurance, yes, will protect you while you're working for that organization, right? The earlier you start your insurance, typically your premiums are a lot lower. The later you get into it, it gets more and more expensive. Now, there are many ways of doing it, and there are probably, you might want to at least give, don't try to stretch beyond your means, right? So at least do something that will give you the basic coverage, and you have the ability to add on as you start looking at it year over year. But I would say that keep it as a continuous process. Don't just do it once and then leave it. I would say that relook at it every year based on what you're planning for, what your long-term plan is. So at the moment, it's probably for yourself, but then you start thinking about, okay, who all are dependent on you? So what are the commitments that you will have to cover in case something happens, right? Touch wood. So I think, and the needs may change year on year, or after 5 years or 10 years, it may change. Once you have a family, once your kids have gone to the university and they can be self-sufficient, of course, probably some of those needs may decrease. So you need to think about it, but you need to relook at it from a year on year. I would say that don't just leave it once. Oh, I just have this, so it's all good. Or my employer does that. Yes, as long as you've got a job, that is good. But after that, you may have some challenges, right? So, and also not all insurance policies are the same, and all of them have different features and capabilities. And so you need to probably seek some advice, in my opinion. There is nothing wrong with it. Talk to some of the financial planners, get some feedback, compare, against many other products that are available, because your needs could be very different from my needs to Devika's needs or Jason's needs. So we all need to work around our own, our own, the plans and our own, external environment that we operate in.
Yeah, I think that's quite true. Going back to the lesson today from Eric, I think year on year review back to your finances. He suggested your birth date just to make it easy to remember, and make sure to talk to your financial advisor. Okay, we have some questions on the Q&A. So this is addressed to Devika. All right, to Devika, apart from your savings to pay for your master's, how do you manage your daily expenses now that you're doing full-time studies and not working?
Okay, I actually managed to save up a sum of money for my master's. So I've kept, like, whatever the fee is there, at least I've managed to keep it. I'm just giving you a real life how it's actually going about right now. So I managed to save up like a sum of it which is needed for my fees and separate that out. So I have a separate sum which is like for more of my daily expenses, and I'm trying to taking it out from that only, but monthly allowance of sorts, I guess. So, and then obviously there's support from I stay with my family, so there's a bit of support from there also. So yeah, that's how I'm trying to maneuver the situation.
So basically, I think during your savings, you have also included your living expenses, the total amount, and of course, seek support when you need and when you can.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy that I'm able to fund for this by myself as much as possible, but then I'm also trying to prioritize how much ever is the spending is going to take account of.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much for your answer. Okay, we actually have a next question to Jason. Do you hope that the COVID measurements limiting attendees for weddings prolong till you pop the question to save on those expenses? Or do you feel that expenses for things such as weddings and honeymoons are a worthwhile expenditure?
Good question. I think it depends on you and your partner's expectations and values. Yeah. So if it's something that you're looking or even envisioning yourself spending lavishly on, then definitely you have to bear it into consideration. But for myself and my partner, I think we are okay to keep it simple as possible. And we were even joking, that like, oh, might as well get married now. You don't have to spend so much on inviting so many guests. Yeah, just have a Zoom and send you the link.
Yeah, while we are on that topic, this is a very current topic, right? Virtual wedding, or even for some of the young adults, they might be like planning for houses or BTO or weddings or whatsoever. What do you guys think? What tips do you guys have for them, or like what's your personal point of view? Maybe start with you first, Jason.
Maybe in terms of the applying for a BTO or a house. So, because this one was the most recent. So, one tip is, I think, look at your finances of you and your partner first before going into applying for it. Because one thing that we didn't expect initially. So what happened is that we applied to just try, if we get it, then we take it from there. And we got it. So, but then from there, we had to see whether we could actually finance it. And because of my current line of work, the government doesn't see it as, they don't consider it in the salary amount. So you would think that, oh, you'll be eligible for more grants and stuff, which we were. But when we were applying for the loan, which we opted for HDB loan, so you have a choice of bank loan and the HDB loan. When we went for that, they granted us a pretty low amount because they only considered my partner's salary. Yeah, so even though I think in the second talk, Eric mentioned HDB loan can finance up to 90% of the housing. What people do not know is that they actually consider, or they may not know, is that they actually consider how much you two are earning and the debts that you have, and that they take all of that into account to give you the loan amount. So in the end, we were only financed with 30% of the full amount. So we had to pay out of our pockets like 200,000. Yeah.
Okay, I think there's more like up to 90% when you pass through some discount items. Then only one item is at 90%. Okay. How about Raj? What was your experience back then when you were like looking for a home, or what's for your family planning and whatsoever? What kind of tips would you share with our young adults?
Yeah, I mean, we bought our first home in, I think, 5 years or 4 years plus after we graduated, right? So we were also working and saving and so on to make that happen. So yes, I mean, of course there is, I mean, you start asking or you start seeking a professional help in terms of finding a place and things like that. So it was actually a lot more easier. After going through many places, of course, we decided in terms of what we want, and then we kind of, put the money in to make that happen. It did help that both of us were working, of course, and that basically helps with the loans and all those kind of things. So of course, you stretch a little bit when it comes to your duration of repayment at that point in time, because again, based on the income and how much you want to repay on a monthly basis and all that, right, from a budgeting point of view. But eventually, whenever there was an opportunity to relook at the mortgage, we started reducing the term in terms of how long we would keep that, right? So that was, for example, in the first time we took it for like 35 years because it was possible at that time. But then 5 years later, when we had an opportunity at that time, the interest rate was probably like 1%. and we could maintain that for like 5 years. And then when we had the opportunity to remortgage, then we brought it down to 20. And then when I had an opportunity to remortgage it again, or relook at the mortgage, then we brought it down to like 15. So of course, so there is always opportunity to relook at it, and based on the stage where you're in, and then you manage from there. But of course, the initial commitment and the initial upfront that you need to come up with, it's going to be, it's all your savings, your CPF, any other, what do you call it, savings that you might have kept. And then at the early stages, it's definitely challenging when you're thinking that you're just starting to work, and, you need to bring it all together by yourself. So, of course, but we'll all get through that phase. We'll all find a way. That's the reality.
Okay, well, we're talking about that, since the question was also talking about wedding. So how about your wedding? Do you still remember? What did you do? Do you think it was worth it for you? What do you think?
Yeah, we had a very small function in Singapore, as a matter of fact. Small group. We had just a solemnization function. That's about it, right? Then we had function back home in terms of the big Indian wedding thing, right? Or so-called the big Indian wedding. But it was not like stretched over a week or whatever, as you see in the movies. But the reality is that we managed whatever we could within our means at that point in time. And I think that's important, right? No point you stretch yourself too thin, and then after that you're worried about it for the next 5 years, 10 years. And then you also have got these commitments of, your house and other things that you might be looking at that point in time. So all these expenses would come on top of the other. So that's where I think avoid falling into the trap of like, that when we talked about that compounding your debts. So do whatever you can within the means. And I think I like the point that Jason made. I mean, this is a great time for a wedding right now. You can limit any unnecessary expenses by limiting the number of people. But the challenge would be that, you need to manage the family expectation. So it's equally important that the family also understands. Because sometimes your parents would be like, oh, you need to have more people or whatsoever. But then it's up to two of you what you really want to do. And you, as long as you guys are aligned, or you and your partner are aligned, everything else is just for you to manage. Because by the end of the day, you are in it together, and everybody else is just giving their feedback by the end of the day, right? I mean, you can take it, or you don't. If you don't want to take it, you don't have to take it. Don't get pressurized.
Yeah, that's true. I think especially perhaps because we're Asians, right? In that environment, family expectations, parents' input and feedback, they're all very important. Sometimes people think it's not just a union of two, but it's also a union of two families. So it's 2++. But yeah, there's a tip in the chat from Eric. So just to share with everyone, if you have already proposed, I suggest to go ahead with the wedding dinner soonest. Great excuse to invite lesser guests. Max 100 now could save you back some dollars. Oh, all right, great. Since we're talking about family perspective as well, and we are still on the topic, Devika, I know you're single and whatnot, but your brother has married, right? And what do you feel about wedding planning if you were in the process? Do you think it's worthwhile? Do you have anything you share on your perspective as a family member, perhaps?
Okay, if you go about it from an Indian wedding perspective, there's a lot of expenses always. There's so many functions and everything. Like, I think so when we were planning for my brother and everything, like the wedding, he made it clear that, oh, why not just give me that sum of money that you have, like, that my parents wanted to do it. Like, why don't you just give it to me and my sister-in-law now? Like, and we'll just spend it as we want. But then obviously it's always about the two families coming together. So we have to meet that expectation also, that, okay, trying to make our parents happy and like get that also on board, I guess. So yeah, but personally, they would have kept that finances to themselves.
Cash is king, they say. Anyway, I think this reiterates back to the point. Discuss not just with your spouse, but also with your family, or if you want to keep it simple, I mean, everything can be talked about and discussed, I think. So yeah, all right. Moving on to the next question in the Q&A. This is actually to Rush. If this is not too much of a personal question, as a married person, do you and your spouse pool your total income, then plan your expenditures, or do you both split your monthly expenditure responsibilities, such as bills, so as to keep your income separate?
I'm sorry, unmuting myself. Yes. Let me try to answer that without without giving away too much here. Yeah. So I've had this conversation with a few of my colleagues as well around in terms of or at some point these conversations have come about, right? In terms of how do you manage, how do you do this? So everybody has their own ways of doing it, and whatever works for them, that's what I would say, right? So for example, there are pros and cons in each of those cases, and so that's the reason I think the key thing is that you have that understanding in terms of how that's going to work. In our case, I think we make it very clear in terms of when it comes to expenses, we equally split it, which is perfectly fine. And when we are looking at our planning together from the future point of view, we do that as well. Because the challenge is also that both of us have got different risk appetite as well. So that also matters in terms of from an investment point of view. My partner, she is definitely very less risk averse versus I do a lot more risky. So when I pick my investments, I would have a riskier portfolio compared to hers. So of course, so we manage from that perspective. So in the sense that, you know, it's very clear that you cannot put all eggs into one basket, right? So better for both of us if, you know, both does equally well. But when it comes to you know, you need to manage that. You need to manage that. So I wouldn't say that, you know, you both of you invest in the same kind of funds or same kind of products and so on and so forth. So we manage that quite a bit as well. As far as expenses are concerned, we do split on the general expenses, as I would say. I mean, I'm not saying everything or whatever, but generally that's how we manage it. So also from when you look at, again, going back to the point of when you look at your investments, if one of you might be holding more liquid cash versus the other would be a little bit more on the assets, could be heavy on your funds or your equity or your property. So it has to work for you, whatever works for you, right? So that's what I would say. I mean, I haven't, I have got, and especially I see that with most of the foreigners, I would say foreigners in the sense that from the Western countries, that they have a lot more comprehensive plans that they do in terms of like even prenuptial agreements and things like that as well. So, I mean, whatever works for people, I would say. But I've seen that some of my colleagues from the Western countries have a little bit more different approach to the way they do things.
Yeah, of course, there are different approaches, right? So it sounds like, to wrap up everything you've just said, investment-wise, because you guys have a different risk appetite, that's a bit separate, but expenses-wise, it is also shared in between both of you. Is that correct? Yep. Okay, Ken. Jason, since you are also a couple, so to speak, do you have any insights or plans for the future on this or discussions? If it's too personal, it's fine. You can skip it. But if not, do you have anything you'd like to share on it?
I think I'll just share broadly. So I think the main thing we were discussing is whether to have a joint account where we would, you know, spend everything versus status quo where each of us maintains our own accounts and we just take turns to pay for the bills and things like that. I think it's important to sit down and talk to each other because your reasons for wanting a shared account may not be the same as hers. So for example, for me, it's more symbolic as, you know, we have a joint account. It symbolizes we are our union and the trust that we have for each other in spending, versus maybe for my partner, it may not be so, maybe more practical.
Oh, I'm muted. Sorry. Yeah. So basically, I think this goes back to discussion and seeing the comfort level for both sides, right? Basically, it needs to make sure that both sides, their needs are fulfilled. Like, oh, my perspective is so, your perspective is like this. Where can we meet in the middle ground? Right? Okay, Ken. Thank you so much for answering that. I think since we are approaching 5 o'clock soon, so let's go to the last question. Okay, what personal finance tips do you have for young adults or fresh graduates? Okay, let's start with Jason. What tips do you have for fresh graduates or young adults?
I have two tips actually.
Oh,
The first one is a short one on insurance actually, because for fresh grads, if you do not have a job yet, reconsider getting the insurance if it's just you're helping a friend, or a friend just help me meet my quota, because what happens down the line is if you are unable to pay it, you lose your premium, which is what happened to my neighbor actually. And his mom really went at him because he was just helping his friend out, and he spent I think quite a huge amount. Yeah, so only if you have a job and are able to pay for it. But yes, definitely, insurance is important for coverage. Second tip is look at your habits. I think budgeting, all this financing, a lot is down to your habits as well, spending habits. Could be the food you eat, or even taking a bus versus taking a Grab. So before this webinar, I actually went to look at my finances for 2019 versus 2020. So for transport, I managed to save 400 on Grab on transport because I took bus instead. Yeah. So and the year before, actually the amount I spent was 1,000 on Grab alone over a year. This seems a lot, but when you divide it, right, it's actually 2 Grab trips per week, and it's like $10 trips, which is, doesn't seem like a lot, but it adds up. Yeah. So it's about making the choices maybe to live more frugally, or at least choosing, monitoring how you spend.
so basically, I think actually the biggest lesson there is like small expenses add up. That is massive when you hear about it. Okay, how about Devika? What personal finance tips do you have for fresh graduates and young adults?
Okay, I think so. I will give I always look up to my brother for this thing. So he suggested this that, I mean, we are fresh grads, we've got our job also recently. I guess since we're still young, we want to explore. So I would always prioritize the finance, meaning like split it up, probably keep some for it for savings, but then keep the other half to spend it on whatever you want. I guess because you're at that stage of life where you just want to explore and try it out. So that's why, but you have the priorities also where you're budgeting and saving up. So I think I live by that motto because I've seen it in my family, but it may not work for everyone. It may work for some people. So see how it goes and take it as it comes. Plus, yeah.
Okay. How about Raj? What personal finance tips do you have for young adults or fresh graduates?
I would say, even if it's a smallest amount, right? Start saving, leverage the market, right? Leverage the market. So start investing in funds. I mean, there are many available, right? And there are websites that you can take a look at how historically some of these funds have been doing, or seek professional advice. Pick some of those and start saving, even if it's $100, right? Start putting in that. The compound effect is definitely, your future self will thank you for starting that right now. So even if you look at it, right, if I think about it, if I started when I graduated, probably like 14 years back, at that time, if I put $100, what that would be worth right now, it's actually a lot more, right? Because if you're consistently doing it, so do consistent investing into funds, whatever you can, even if it's $100, start doing that. Put a bucket for that, right? So do that. Go with funds because I think you are diversifying your risk as well, and pick different funds if you would want to. And as you're starting your earnings, also like put some money into SRS, for example. That will help you reduce your taxes. And also you can use that money to reinvest somewhere else as well. So invest for sure. I would say leverage the market rather than putting entirely your money into one bucket, which is the bank, which gives you nothing. in reality, in Singapore, if you invest it easily, you get above 6% easily. So I would say that, and if you take on different and you diversify your portfolio a little bit more, you could get better returns. I mean, I have seen some of my funds even returning like 30-40%. So my point is that start doing that, diversify, and that's going to help you really in the long term. Secondly, insure yourself, whatever you can, just insure yourself. Don't rely on your luck. Start doing that at a minimum, and then as you start earning more, as you get into your mid-career and so on, increase as you go ahead, right? As you move forward, and also have that frequent planning conversation with your financial planner. The other thing that I would also highlight is that probably some lessons learned, I would say, keep your insurance and your investment separate. Okay. I know that probably a lot of insurance companies have their investment linked policies and so on. I would say that keep your insurance separate, keep your investment separate, because your money works harder when you're doing your investments separately. Even if it's to an insurance company, they have got plans, or they've got investment policies which doesn't link back to your insurance. What happens when you have both of this together is that the money that you put in, if, for example, if you're putting in 12,000, if you're thinking like, for example, $1,000 a month or $100 a month, let's put it that way, right? A big percentage of that is actually going into your insurance premium for your coverage rather than your investment. So I would say that keep your, for that $100, if you're putting, for example, $50, allocate that per month for your insurance, you can actually get a good coverage. While you make your money work harder for the other $50 or $80 outside, you could actually get better returns. So keep both of them separate as well.
Okay, I think a lot of useful insights over there. Everyone should look back to their insurance and their investment probably after today. I definitely would for mine. Okay, in the interest of time, there's one more question in the Q&A. I don't want to ignore our audience's questions, but let's keep the answer concise so that we can finish up and wrap up. At what stage of your relationship would you guys suggest to have conversations about finances? Is it okay to have such conversations early, or wait till topic of wedding comes up? Okay, since it's couple related, it's probably more addressed to Jason and Raj. So maybe Raj, do you want to pick up the question first?
I thought it would be better for Jason, not for
Jason? Okay, I mean Jason first then. Jason, would you like to give your input on this?
Well, definitely at the start of relationship, ask about their history, medical history, all sorts of things. I think it depends on how soon you intend to get married, or how long your dating process is, because the dating process is where you find out more about your partner. So this will include their spending habits and ways they manage their finances. Yeah. But I would say earlier the better. Yeah, communication is key.
Oh, wow. Very good words there. Communication is key. Well, Raj, the reason why I'm asking you is because you're also married. I mean, he's not married yet, but you're married. So like during your, that point of your life, were you nervous about asking it? How did you ask? When did you ask? Would you like to share, or?
I would say, I mean, when you start knowing a person, you will also understand the way they are, their style when it comes to each of those areas, right? So probably that actually helps you make decision as well. So in the sense that if both of you think alike, I would say it may not be always good also. If both of you have different thought process or different risk appetite or different approach towards life, I think it also helps in terms of debating and probably getting to the right solution in most of the cases, right? So it does help to have a different point of view and a different opinion. But as Jason said earlier, I think the conversation, you need to have it early. And I think it's going to be very important as well, because if you're dating for a few years, you would definitely know how the other person is, whether both of you can complement each other better or not, or if there are changes required, whether that conversations need to happen earlier, right? So you can start making changes in your life as well, or your lifestyle. So I would say that you need to start it as early as possible.
As early as possible, and probably an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you so much, all three of you, for coming to the panel discussion today. I hope that this has been helpful, not just to our audience, but to you guys as well. I hope we have learned from each other, and I've certainly learned a lot today as well.